Hi, welcome to Sewist. My name's Corinne Bradd, and today I want to show you how to make some of these self-closing pouches, which are really handy for just keeping things in. Now, I'll be honest with you, if you put something weighty in there and turn it upside down, it's not going to stay closed. I will demonstrate with a reel of cotton, which will probably fall on the floor. And it will deny me it actually will hold a reel of cotton closed. But they're very similar to the, like the click close pouches, the ones that are made, you know, sometimes you see people, they've used old tape measures, metal tape measures, to put in the top. But they're a lot more flexible. They will stay open if you leave them open. And they're really handy for things like haberdashery pouches. Because sometimes, if you're pinning something and you need to get something, you want to be able to open the container with one hand, which you can do with these. And the reason they are so much easier to use than a tape measure top is because we've used this stuff, which is a flexible magnetic sheet that you can buy from most good craft shops, and it's the kind of thing that people use to make fridge magnets and stuff like that. So, I'll show you how to make it. And the fact that that is so flexible is what makes this project so easy. There'll be a template for you to download in the description below, and essentially it will be a little purse shape and that will be a biggish purse shape. So I'm going to do the darker fabric in the small purse shape, and what you'll need to do with directional fabric is make sure that each piece is facing the correct way up. Find your glasses so you can see what you're doing. And I'm just going to use a soft red pencil to draw around this. And I'm going to be adding a 5mm seam allowance. So the line that I'm drawing here will be my stitching line. Just pop a couple of pins in that. And cut that out. So this is the outer, and then the lining fabric, this isn't quite so directional, it doesn't really matter quite as much. You need to cut out the larger part of the template. So again, and I find it much easier to have card templates, especially if you're going to make multiples of this. It's so much quicker than just putting a paper pattern on it, pinning it, and then trying to cut around a pinned paper pattern. So there you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew the linings to the inners. Now I'm going to leave these pieces pinned together because actually it makes it much easier when you're coming to stitch the whole thing. But we just line up these straight edges, pop a couple of pins in there for safety's sake. And again, line up these raw edges. And it helps if you can use whichever side of the fabric you actually drew your guidelines on as the uppermost side. Makes life much easier when you're stitching because you've then got a guideline to follow. And we'll just pop them in and sew. So that's one piece, or one seam, and here's the other. So you've got your linings and your outers sewn together, and this is the top seam. This is this seam here. This seam here is this one here. Now, what's important to note is where to start and stop stitching around the edge. And where your pattern has indented onto that short line, if you just pop a pin in there and in there, and then line these seams up quite neatly so that you can get the best finish you can on it. And it's one of those things, it's always worth double checking where your seams are and lining your seams up, you know, manually, not relying upon where you've already pinned the fabric. Because if your seam allowances are a couple of mil out, as mine always are, you will find that although your fabric might join up perfectly at the bottom, it won't join up on the seams, and it's the seams that you're going to see. You're not going to see that this piece of fabric is 1 millimetre longer than the other. So first of all, we're going to sew from those original joining seams all the way around the bottom of the pocket, using your pencil line as a guide. And trying not to break your needle on the pin. Just going to move them so they don't get in the way. And then, let's take the pins out before I forget, try and turn it the right way out. And then where you have pinned the bottoms of the straight edges, we'll do exactly the same. So from mark to mark, all the way around the bottom of the bag. Oh. And because we've left these gaps, these act as perfect turning gaps. But before I turn it the right way out, what I want to do is I want to make sure that they don't stretch or get frayed or look ugly. So I'm just going to grab a glue stick and run a little glue down that raw edge and fold it in to hem it. And I'm using that glue just as a temporary fix, because in a little while I'll be stitching over the top of this. But what it does mean is it actually makes your life so much easier if you've got a hemmed edge to work with rather than a potentially fraying edge. Especially when you're turning stuff the right way out. And the nice thing about a dry glue stick is it won't tend to bleed through the fabric. But it will pick up every single bit of fraying cotton that you can imagine. But you know, there's pros and cons to everything. So fold them in. And then we're going to turn the bag out through one of the gaps. The best way to do it is pop your thumb inside and gather it up. And then just push everything through. Now this bit of your bag here, the larger piece, will become your lining. You don't really need to worry too much about turning this out perfectly because you're only going to stuff it back inside. But this piece here, which is your outer, if you just run your finger around the insides of the seams to make sure that your curve is nice and clean. And in an ideal world, you would give this a good press. And then what you do is pop your lining inside your pouch, like so. And push it down as far as it will go. And what it will do is it will make a nice cuff around the top of your bag. Just going to double check that's in there completely. And if you pin that cuff, try and make sure it's as even as possible. And then we're just going to top stitch. So I'm going to take the accessory drawer off my machine, because what it means is I can pop this right over the bed. And then also, I think I've mentioned to you before, if you want to get a perfect seam along a perfect edge, I've found the easiest way to do it is to actually turn your zigzag stitch to its furthest point, use a zigzag foot, because then the needle will go down and it won't hit the foot. You can still operate the machine correctly. And then line up your seam to the inside of the zigzag foot. And it's almost like a stitch in the ditch if you were quilting. But it's a much easier guide for you to sew to. Just a little bit worried about that. Hold on a minute. Yes, I thought I had. I've folded my fabric up inside it. One of the problems that I do find with sewing is, in order to film these demonstrations, I do have to keep my sewing machine at arm's length, and I do have to work on the side. It's not the best way to sew, because normally when I'm at home I'm like this. But, you know, we do it so that you can actually see what we're doing at all times. But it does mean that you sometimes let things slip. So I'm just going to tie off those ends that I was sewing. And really, with something like this, with the channel, you know, even if your fabric is rucked up slightly, you're going to struggle to actually complete the bag neatly if you don't stop what you're doing and unpick it. I'm just going to pin that again properly. And try not to let it get rucked up this time. Worst thing in the world is when you complete a project and you turn it over and you realise that something's gone wrong. And there you go. Now what you could do with something like this is actually you could run a drawstring through those two channels and just have it as a little diddy bag. But I've made enough drawstring bags for you before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a ruler, measure that channel, which is 3 centimetres, and I'm going to cut a strip of this magnetic sheet that is 2.5 centimetres. Now this stuff is so soft you can cut it quite easily with scissors, and you can cut it incredibly easily with a rotary cutter. Like so. And then this bag is 15 centimetres wide, so I'm going to cut each of these pieces into 14 centimetres because I just want to give myself enough seam allowance at either end. In all honesty, if you forget to cut these down, I've got a feeling that this stuff is so soft you could probably actually stitch through it. I have yet to try that. That could be a project for another day. If you've ever watched any of the other magnetic videos we've done, you will notice that there's a shiny side and a dull side on this. The shiny sides stick to each other. And they do have a north and a south pole. So if you're not careful, they will, there's some ways that it will stick, but it will stick off centre. Actually, that's not too bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all those loose ends for a start. I'm going to turn this bag inside out. Again, actually, because there is no seam that you've had to fold in and over sew on this bag, these are completely reversible. And I'm going to thread the channel with the magnetic strip. So make sure the shiny side is on the lining side. And just pop it in there and slide it through. Shiny side on the lining side. And push it through to the ends. So you're leaving about 5mm or 1/8 of an inch of unmagnetised fabric at each end. And then turn your needle back to the central position before you forget. Line up these edges, which are already hemmed, so it's quite nice because you won't then get raw edges on the inside. And just join those sides up with the scant 2mm seam allowance. Do one side. Make sure your magnets are pushed well down inside before you do the other side. And so you could use an old metal tape measure to make a bag in exactly this way, but because the metal tape measures tend to be not quite as flexible, you might end up finding that your bag would be this way round with the seams at the side. But because this magnetic strip is so easy to bend, you can just turn it around, push out the curves, and then it closes shut. And you can, as I say, it's not going to hold a load of weight if you put several things in it. I'm going to prove this now by putting several things in it. But if you've got a basket or a needlework basket that you tend to think and you just want to compartmentalise stuff, you can put things in there and you can line them up. And as long as you can remember what you've put in where, you can just open them up with one hand. If you put them in your handbag, yeah, no, look, it's still holding. I did put a load of loose change in there the other day and it fell out immediately, but then that's because I've got so much money. Again, great little handbag organisers these are. You know, if you've got makeup or if you've got medication or something like that that you just want to keep in your handbag but separate. And you can enlarge and reduce the pattern. You can just do it with a general rectangle. Really very handy, really very simple to make and really very pretty. So I hope you enjoyed that demonstration. I hope you will come and join us again very, very soon. But until now, thank you very much for watching. If you've been inspired to create, please share your makes with us in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed videos by the Crafts channel, hit the like button. Want to see more of us? Then click subscribe. See you next time.